On April 2, the whole world will be caught up in a fierce wave of tariffs when Donald Trump launches a new tax policy that can completely change the global trade landscape. Great powers, especially Europe, are waiting with bated breath, wondering whether they have the strength to confront these terrible taxes, or will they have to bow their heads and accept the imposition from the US. This is not just a tax war, but a power struggle where major economies will face decisions that could change the global future. Join us to follow the dramatic developments in today's episode. The US is facing a rather hard-to-swallow problem. They are importing more than they export, and the result is a huge trade deficit, about 1,200 billion USD. Imagine this hole as a torn bag. Every day more money keeps falling in, and no one knows how to mend it. This not only causes the US economy to struggle, but also directly threatens domestic industries. That's why Donald Trump couldn't just sit back and watch this situation continue forever, so he decided to take action. How to change the situation? It's simple. Increase taxes on countries that don't play fair with the US. Where taxes on American goods are lower, Trump does not hesitate to raise taxes to teach them a lesson. His goal is quite understandable: protect domestic businesses and create a more level playing field. If other countries do not do the right thing, America will not hesitate to retaliate. It's so simple, but it's enough to make the whole world pay attention. There is an injustice that America has suffered for a long time, and Donald Trump decided he could not leave it alone. Imagine, cars from Europe brought into the US are only taxed at 2.5%, while if American cars want to enter Europe, the tax rate is up to 10%. Such a huge and unfair difference. This puts American automakers at a disadvantage, unable to compete fairly with European competitors. And so Trump, with a hot head and not afraid of collision, decided to change this situation immediately. He wants other countries to respect America's interests, so that domestic businesses are not left behind. We cannot let American companies suffer forever just because of unfair regulations. The US has an extremely simple but also extremely effective plan: make the whole world stick to the dollar. Every time a country wants to transact internationally, whether buying or investing, it must use dollars. And so all economies in the world have no choice but to pour money into the US financial system. This helps the US not only maintain power, but also keep the dollar strong and dominate the world without having to do anything too complicated. Countries that want to trade need dollars, and when there are dollars, the US is always in a dominant position. The reality is, America doesn't need to wave its hands, they just need to sit still, and everything will automatically fall into their hands. That is America's grand strategy, and so far it is working extremely well. But the US has designed a quite smart system to always maintain global control. How? They use the trade deficit as a trump card. The US imports more than it exports, causing the deficit to grow larger. But behind it is a sophisticated strategy. Other countries are forced to earn dollars to trade, thereby becoming dependent on this currency. So what does America get from that? Quite simply, they do not need to produce goods or work as hard as other countries. Instead, America sits at the center of all international financial transactions, controlling money flows and shaping markets without doing much more than maintaining the power of the dollar. They own the whole world without having to touch a single car or shirt. Just like that, America maintains its position as a big man without having to overdo it. Europe has cleverly taken advantage of the US as a large consumption yard to sell cars and other products, profiting from exports to this giant market. However, the price to pay is not small. Although it is possible to satisfy the needs of American consumers, European countries must accept dependence on the dollar in all international transactions. Whether they like it or not, they are under America's control, while still having to find a way to maintain their economy. As for China, the story is more complicated. The US constantly imposes taxes and even bans high-tech exports to China. Why? The US knows clearly that if China develops high-end technology, it will threaten America's position in the international arena. They fear that one day China will surpass them. Therefore, the US is ready to use all measures to keep China behind, not giving them the opportunity to rise strongly in the field of technology. China is gradually becoming an extremely formidable competitor in the field of technology. They not only produce high-quality technology items, but are also creating chips and software that directly threaten American dominance. Chinese products are improving day by day, and soon we could see a future where China surpasses America in technology, a scenario that no one wants to think about. But America will never let that happen. To maintain the throne, they are willing to apply all measures, from imposing heavy taxes on Chinese goods to banning the export of high technology, which is the key to helping China develop strongly. The US goal is very clear: to prevent China from rising, not letting them take the leading position in the technology industry. The US knows that if China lets China progress too quickly, it will no longer be the only big guy on the global technology playground. When Donald Trump decided to impose tariffs on goods from countries like Europe and China, it was not just a move to protect American industry, but a wise, strategic move. The US wants to do something bigger: cut off countries' dependence on China. By pushing up taxes, the US forces these countries to think again and no longer be able to rely on cheap goods from China. This is a calculated step, not only to protect US interests, but also to restructure the global economy. The US wants other countries to be more self-reliant and seek new sources of supply instead of continuing to put their trust in China. And this causes countries around the world to reconsider their relationship with China, rethinking whether they should continue to depend on a superpower that is becoming increasingly powerful and difficult to control. When the US decided to impose high taxes on cars imported from Europe, everything started to turn upside down. The luxury cars that American consumers once loved are now more expensive than ever. This forces those who want to own an expensive car to prepare their mind and wallet more. But the story doesn't stop with consumers. Automobile manufacturing companies in the US are starting to feel the pressure from this tax policy. To avoid being sunk in the sea of rising costs, they must find every way to reduce costs while increasing domestic production and focusing on consumption right in the US market. Faced with a difficult problem, how to survive and develop in an increasingly harsh tariff environment, auto manufacturers have no other choice but to manage and not be knocked out of the game. When tariffs were imposed, prices of goods from Europe and China began to escalate. Items that American consumers once bought easily, such as clothes, electronics, or even imported cars, have suddenly become much more expensive. The favorite coats, the latest phones, or the luxury car that everyone dreams of are no longer easily accessible. This causes American consumers to rest a bit before taking out their wallets as they begin to realize that they have to pay more for items that previously only required a little spending to buy. This tax policy has made things more difficult, and now consumers not only have to calculate each purchase decision more carefully, but also have to live with the price they pay. When the US unveiled its new tax policy, Europe, China, and other big players weren't about to sit back and let things unfold. They jumped into action right away, scrambling to protect their own economies while also hunting for new markets to soften the blow of rising tariffs. But this isn't just a clash between the US and its main rivals anymore. It's turned into a global showdown. Countries everywhere are staring down a future filled with uncertainty, where every new tax move can shift the entire course of their development plans. The competition isn't just happening behind closed doors in boardrooms anymore. It's spilling out into the global marketplace. These decisions are shaking up economies around the world, forcing nations to rethink their strategies, all while trying to keep pace in a high-stakes race for power and resources. The world is on edge, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Although the tax measures that Trump introduced caused many people to argue, his goal is very clear and ambitious: protecting American national interests. With this strategy, Trump not only wants to protect domestic industries, but also wants to restrain the rapid development of major competitors like China. He understands that for the United States to maintain its global leadership position, It is impossible to let other countries dominate key areas such as technology or manufacturing, especially when these rivals are increasingly closer in terms of direct competition. Trump recognizes that to maintain power, the U.S. must act before it is too late, not only protecting but also renewing competitive advantages in the changing global context. The trade war between the U.S. and major powers such as China and Europe is escalating and could change the world economic order. Will America's tariff decisions bring victory or just plunge the global economy into chaos? Prices are escalating, supply chains are upset. Who will pay the final price? The future of the U.S. and world economies hangs by a thin thread, and every next move will determine the global fate.